Hi, I'm Brian Crombie, and we're going to be talking on The Brian Crombie Show. We're going to be talking about politics, arts, business, and social issues on The Brian Crombie Show on Canada One TV. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Show on Canada One TV. You know, it's going to be a real pleasure for me tonight to introduce you to three very impressive young adults who I came across for a bunch of reasons. Number one, they're all in university, they're all in fourth year, they're all very accomplished. They've all got a lot of interest outside of just the academics that they're involved in. You know, I think it's going to be interesting to find out, you know, how they've been doing in this past year. They're all black, they're all of mixed race, they're all students. They were raised by a single mom in a white community. Like, they've got a lot of issues that I think are going to be interesting to chat about. So I want to introduce you to Lalique, Marcus, and Janelle Allen. Guys, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
So let me tell you a little bit about these impressive young adults. To start with, Lalique, who's the eldest of triplets, if you can believe it, is in her fourth year at Queen's University studying global development. She's been active in the executive team of the Queen's Black Academic Society. She loves using her talents to do hair and makeup for people of color within local fashion shows or photo shoots. Marcus is a student going into his third year in kinesiology and health sciences with a minor in business at York University. He has been an active member and leader in his church youth group, and he's also a physical guy playing a lot of sports, and he's the second-born triplet. Janelle Allen is a student in her fourth year at Western University working toward her honors specialization in media information and technoculture. Technoculture. I'm going to have to ask you about that. That sounds interesting. She's been an active executive member of the Western's Black Student Association for the past 2 years. She's an accomplished artist, and this is how I came across her, because her art was showcased at a digital art series called Black is Beautiful. And I've actually seen a bunch of her paintings or digital art, and they're just spectacular. So someone that is well worth watching in the future. But in addition, she and her partner run something called Gem Jolie, which is customizable jewelry brand, and all she does she also does Customs by Janelle, a customizable sneaker brand. What an unbelievably interesting, you know, group of activities you guys are involved in.
Yeah.
And you're triplets. What was it like growing up as triplets, Janelle?
So that's a really interesting question. Growing up we really didn't have, I guess, a sense of identity, because we were kind of clumped into, like, those are the triplets, quote unquote. So once we were separated from the triplets, like, people didn't really even know our names individually or who we were, kind of. We were just the triplets. So we kind of grew up with that whole kind of energy around us. And then we eventually split up for university. So I went to Western, Luke went to Queen's, he started off at Laurier, so we all kind of split off and were able to find our own identity, which was great. But growing up as a triplet, do you guys have anything to add on to that?
It was pretty fun, actually. You always had a friend with you. Yeah. You always had someone to hang out with. But yeah, like Janelle said, you were just known as one of the triplets. So yeah, you didn't really have your own personality, but you always had a friend with you, which is nice.
So Marcus, I've got 3 kids. I've got 2 boys and a girl, and the one outlier, the female, was always playing the guys off against each other. Do you play the 2 sisters off against each other and make friends with one and then make friends with the other one and make sure they compete?
I'm playing both sides all the time.
Both sides all the time.
Yeah.
You say you're really involved in your church. Tell me about your church. Why is it important to you?
So our church, we go to Grant AME, an African Methodist Episcopal Church in Toronto.
An African Methodist Episcopal Church. That's interesting. Tell me about it.
Well, there's many different AME churches all over the world. Grant is just one of them. But we've been with Grant for a long time, ever since our mom first came to Canada when she was 14.
She came to Canada at 14 from Jamaica.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That must have been brave for her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so we have a long history with Grant.
And you're all in the choir?
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I was soprano, alto, tenor.
Yeah.
The Allen family singers, fantastic.
Yeah. And our involvement with our church also goes very far. And we just strongly believe in giving back. So in terms of that, we've done many different fundraisers with our church. We also assist with Sunday school, just anything around. There's no shortage of things to do at a church.
Lalique, you're involved in global development. Why global
Yes.
development?
Well, at first I was actually a science student, and then I came to Queens and I realized I kind of wanted to focus my studies more about like race and justice and things along those lines. So I felt like global development was the closest like degree that I could get towards that. So yeah, that's why I chose to study global development.
And what's technoculture?
All right, so media, information, and technoculture. That's a great question. It's kind of technically a made-up word.
Yes,
but
technically it is a
it's
technically made-up word.
definitely my program is a bit newer, and they're even still trying to figure out a definition for it, an official definition, but the way I would describe it is like techno, if you split it up, techno and then culture, you kind of learn how technology has influenced and has kind of created a whole new culture, and has really, when you look at the world that we live in today, how we're surrounded by technology. It's almost a part of us. We always have our phones on us. We're always looking at our screens now, especially now because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So it really does take a deep dive into like the history of communication, but also how we've come to where we are right now and how technology has really shaped that. So
Now, it's
really
interesting, Janelle, I became introduced to you because of your art and your exhibition at the Black is Beautiful exhibition in London. And you depicted different black individuals, and you talked to me a little bit about the comparison of beauty for a black person, beauty for a white person. And then Lalique, you're a makeup artist, you say, and it's primarily for black people in fashion shows and things like that. Tell me, is that different or is that the same? You know, you're talking about cosmetics to accentuate or what?
Yeah.
Blackness or make black people beautiful or what is it? And you were describing things like how curly hair you thought was too often depicted negatively and you had to straighten your hair to be more fashionable. Tell me about beauty and being black.
I guess I'll start us off. So I personally think too often, and I guess growing up in our situation as well, being in a predominantly white spaces all the time.
You grew up in Richmond Hill?
Yeah, we grew
in
up
a white
Richmond.
community.
Exactly. So there was always this Eurocentric beauty standard that was just...
Sorry, a Euro?
Oh yeah, Eurocentric beauty standard.
Eurocentric beauty standard.
Yes, meaning that the beauty standard really did revolve around white features, straight hair, and everything white basically, and that's obviously we don't fit into that, right? We never did, and anyone who's of color just doesn't. So if that's mainly what's being shown and fed to us and being labeled beautiful, then how is everyone else supposed to feel when they don't fit that standard? So I think my artwork was kind of just a tribute to a different type of beauty that wasn't shone, like that people didn't shine enough light on growing up, especially for not only myself, but girls of darker skin, girls everywhere around the world who just never felt beautiful because they didn't see themselves within like the media and representation. Yep. So kind of really making a statement and like showcasing cornrows, showcasing curly hair, showcasing blackness, and showcasing the fact that it is beautiful, and that of course everyone is beautiful, and like everyone does have their different types of beauty, and I think that needs to be acknowledged rather than labeling one thing as beautiful.
And so, Lalique, you're doing cosmetics for primarily black models.
Yeah, well,
So are you accentuating their blackness or are you making them Eurocentric?
Well, mostly accentuating their blackness, but also making them feel beautiful in their own skin.
Right.
When you're on set, a lot of people don't know how to deal with big curly hair or kinky coily hair or darker skin tones. They don't know what colors look best on them and things like that. And so a lot of the time models will end up crying and things
Really?
like that. Yeah, because they don't feel like they look good because the person who did their makeup and hair doesn't actually know how to do it correctly. So sometimes I'll just go on sets and help out and do makeup and hair for some of those models. So
I know you guys are going to find this shocking to hear, but I was actually a runway model in a fashion show.
Really?
And, I was, and I had to go out behind the winner of last year's Canada's Top Supermodel, who was black and stunningly attractive. And I asked her for some advice as to what to do. And she said there's only one secret to be successful on the runway, and that is to stride strong, confident, and bold.
Exactly.
Wow.
So it wasn't about straight hair or long hair, right? It was about strong, confident, and bold. Anyway, we're going to take a break and come back more with Lalique and Marcus and Janelle Allen, the Allen family sisters. No, just kidding. Three very impressive young students. I'm going to ask them a little bit about race relations and how they feel growing up in Canada. Mixed race, black, in a predominantly white community. Stay with us. Hi, I'm Brian Crombie, and we're going to be talking on the Brian Crombie Show. We're going to be talking about politics, arts, business, and social issues on the Brian Crombie Show on Canada One TV. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Show on Canada One TV. What an incredibly interesting evening tonight to be interviewing Lalique, Marcus, and Janelle Allen, three really quite impressive young adults, Queens, York and Western, all very successful students, very involved in their church, very involved in art and fashion, and pretty impressive people. A year ago, in this very studio, I interviewed several different people. One was a black trustee for the Board of Education, several other people, black NDP, MPP, about the race riots. And a year ago, around now, we were in the middle of a whole bunch of, it was almost a summer of protests in Canada, the United States, around the world, really, as an after effect of the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, a year and a couple months ago. Did that impact any of you at all?
Yeah, I think it definitely took a toll on all of us, and I feel like a lot of people of color as well, and even people who aren't of color, just a lot of people within the nation. I think that it was a very difficult thing to see, and especially it was on video. Everyone knows what happened, so I think that it was very hard to see. But I think it was also important that everyone was able to come together and acknowledge what happened and fight for.
I thought that the fact that it was, the protests, particularly in Canada, but I think in the United States as well, there was black and white young people leading the protests was wonderful, and it was something that I hadn't seen as much before, that it was everyone. But Marcus, maybe I can ask you, I had an NDP MPP, a black guy from Somalia, a very accomplished gentleman, who said, Brian, you just don't understand what racism is all about. He says, I get carded all the time. I've been carded by the same police officer 6 times. Have you been carded?
No, I haven't actually.
Really? Fantastic.
No, but
Have you experienced racism?
I definitely have.
How?
As a kid growing up, as we spoke, in a predominantly white neighborhood, growing up in a predominantly white school, even a private school in high school, I feel like that just kind of further separates me from my peers, my classmates, and racism can come in many different forms, as we know. Even if it's not directly towards you, you can still feel it. You still know the effects of racism, and I think it really changes how you see the world compared to someone who's not a person of color.
Right. Janelle, you talked about beauty and Eurocentric versus another. I thought Michelle Obama, more than almost anyone, was someone who made her authentic beauty something that everyone could accept. I'm reading this fascinating book about social capital and political capital, and it was described Barack Obama as having more sensual, almost erotic capital because it was so good looking, so athletic, etc. But that didn't change things. Didn't, like, even though they were, President and First Lady of the United States, I would have thought it would have changed people's attitudes, but it didn't seem to have that. If anything, it was almost a reaction against it when the United States voted for Trump. How do you think about that?
Well, I definitely think in terms of like the reaction that they got, they're public figures and they are people of color in a country that, the States is definitely, I would say, prejudiced towards them. Sometimes not rightfully so, but I think that the reaction was definitely swayed and because of the color of their skin. And yeah, I definitely think that it's, sorry, I'm not sure exactly how to answer.
Okay, that's okay. So some people think that the murder of George Floyd and the protests that happened thereafter, obviously very negative, but that the silver lining was that it focused a light on an issue of police brutality, particularly anti-black racism against black people, that would not have been focused if it hadn't been for the combination of his murder, but also, frankly, the social media attention of it. That video that the young student took that became viral, and was it positive? Do you think in the end that you had that kind of attention to the issue, or has that last year, we had all those protests, has nothing changed?
I think it was good in the sense that it definitely brought a lot of light and attention to an issue that has been going on for many years. Mm-hmm. And I think that now that in this day and age with phones, it's just even more, like, it just spreads awareness like a wildfire.
Right.
But in terms of actual action and moving forward, what we will see, I don't know how to answer that. But I definitely think it's a step in a good direction. Bringing awareness to these issues is definitely something that won't hurt it.
I was shocked at how many people went out and protested in the middle of a pandemic, and encouraged that a lot of them were not just black. The protests were often black and white people, primarily young people, together. And I don't know, I told you before our show started that when I went to high school, there was one, maybe two people of color in my class. Today, my kids are colorblind. Their friend group is everybody.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely think that in terms of the young people now, like the young people living in this movement and really being a part of it, we really do, I wouldn't say necessarily we see each other as colorblind. I think that we all acknowledge each other for who we are, and we see each other. I see my peers and their differences, but I accept it.
Right.
And I uplift my peers, and it doesn't matter if you're Indigenous, if you're Asian, if you're Black, if you're Jewish, it doesn't matter. If you see, I feel like young people have a mentality now that if you see injustice, doesn't matter your religion or color or anything, you really do need to start standing up for it and using your voice, because I think over the past year we've not only seen Black Lives Matter, we've seen Asian Lives Matter, we've seen the fight for Palestine, we've seen all these things happening to different groups of people, and at the end of the day there's been how many movements but labeled with different groups of people, but when you realize
well, the sign just outside this studio was Every Child Matters.
Exactly.
Obviously about the unmarked graves issue.
Exactly.
But you guys are also of mixed race. Is that
Correct.
an issue? Is that a challenge, or is that a non-issue?
It's a bit of both, I would say.
I would say because we have lighter skin tone, people feel like it's easier for them to make a little sly racist comment sometimes because, oh, well, you're not fully black, so it's fine.
You're kidding, really?
Yeah, people really think that that's like okay, and I'm like, no, we're still black at the end of the day. Like, I'll still be treated as a black person over another, like a white person, right? So first and foremost, I might be mixed race, but first and foremost to the public, I am black. So yeah, I would say being mixed does have like pros, cons, but yeah.
Your mom must be unbelievable. Single mom, came here at 14, raised the three of you. By herself?
Yeah.
She must be
Yeah.
superhuman.
Yeah, she came to Canada when she was 14 and then studied at the University of Toronto and kind of just, she came alone, so she kind of just made her way. She had a couple family members here, and so.
I
Yeah.
want to meet your mom sometime. She must have a
Yeah.
great story. I'm going to do an interview with
Yeah.
her. So let me just finish up by asking 10 years from now, where are each of you going to be and what are you going to be doing? Janelle?
As you mentioned before, I started my own customizable fashion collective called Elevated States, in which my shoe customization brand operates under Custom by Janelle, and my best friend and business partner, her customizable jewelry line, Gem Jolie, also operates under. So I plan on expanding to custom.
So fashion magnet.
Yeah, so
Awesome.
Custom fashion, denim, and everything like that. Eventually starting a YouTube channel. We were all thinking of starting maybe a podcast and kind of just expanding our reach and really just like sharing our talents and what we can offer.
Marcus, 10 years from now, where are you going to be?
10 years, I plan on obviously graduating and getting a degree with kinesiology and using that to pursue occupational therapy. I also plan on starting a clothing line this summer, so in 10 years, hopefully all is good and I can pursue that full time.
Still singing in the choir?
Unfortunately not,
No?
but who knows? I mean, down the line, I could be singing.
Lalique, 10 years from now, where are you going to be?
Hopefully graduated. I do want to go eventually to school to get certified for like makeup and hair and maybe take that further. I'm in global development, so I'd also really like to help people. So perhaps the UN, something along those lines.
The three of you are very impressive, and I think you're great examples of Canadian youth, and I'm so glad that you chose to come and share your stories with me. I really appreciate it. And I got to tell you that I think that what happened a year ago was terrible but wonderful, because it was terrible what happened to George Floyd, but it was wonderful because it raised awareness to a bunch of issues that people didn't talk about, and we talked about it a lot. It became the issue of last summer, and I think it continued. And I think that the fact that you guys are talking about it today and you're doing your art, and you're doing your fashion, and you're involved in your church is wonderful. And I think that you're all going to be great contributors to Canadian society, and I look forward to how you're going to change Canadian society. So thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you
for
for
having
having us.
Well, that's our show for tonight. Thank you so much. And if there are more young people like this in our country, we're going to have a great future. Thanks for joining us.